Hello everyone and welcome back to Closets Gaming. Today we are going to take a look at Humankind Lucy OpenDev. This beta version of an upcoming 4X strategy game promises to take you through the history of mankind, starting with the Neolithic era up to the early modern era, and introduce you to its basic concepts while getting information from you on what could be done better for the developers. The Lucy OpenDev version is available for free until the 24th of December, and you can pre-order the full version of Humankind for €59.99 or your regional equivalent. The journey of humanity has been more than perilous over the eons. Many times we've faced dire troubles and possible extinction, but through curiosity, strength, and sheer willpower, we managed to become the most dominant species our planet has ever seen. And in Humankind, it's up to you to make sure it's your civilization that rises to the top. Explore, expand, exploit, exterminate. These are the 4 core tenets of 4X games. And I personally have a long history with 4X games. The very first I played was the original Civilization game. I was a kid and I had no idea what I'm doing, but just the idea of building up a civilization from its very first baby steps towards a glorious future intrigued me even then. Most recently, I have been playing the newest installment in the Civilization series, Civ 6, with my girlfriend. So, when I noticed an open beta test of Humankind, I quickly joined the beta and hopped in. It takes years to discover all the tricks that can be found in such complex games as 4X games tend to be. So, don't expect this to be a comprehensive review that will cover every single little thing. This could never be that, as the Lucy OpenDev doesn't even provide you the chance to try out everything that will be in the full game. But it does give you a fair chance to judge whether you should be interested in Humankind or whether it should disappear from your radar. We start way back, when humans were still hunters and gatherers. With your roaming band of your Neolithic humans, you wander the earth searching for food and knowledge. Perhaps you will even build your first permanent settlement, but soon it will be time to move on and join the ranks of civilizations that have reached the ancient era. And as you do, it's also time to decide what kind of a culture will you be, then from 10 different choices that each come with some unique benefits such as higher yields of certain resources or a special unit. Choose wisely, as even this earliest of choices will influence your future gameplay. But don't be afraid. With every era, you get to choose either whether you will keep your current culture or adopt a new one. As each era provides 10 different possible choices, the total number of unique cultures you can create is a staggering 1 million. It's fully up to you whether you'd like to pursue a road towards a victory that focuses on trade, warfare, or culture. Each of these options is viable, as the winning civilization is decided based on the points you gathered throughout the ages. But I feel the need to stress this out again. Choose your cultures wisely, as making an incorrect choice can set you back by quite a lot. Your cities are the key to victory. They are the places where you produce not only your units to conquer your enemies, but also the places of trade, culture, and science. And you will need all these things to run a successful civilization. No nation can live purely by raiding its enemies. Nor can you hope to never encounter war though. You need to be prepared for everything, as your neighbors will want to exploit your resources for their own needs just as much as you will want to use theirs for yours. If you get caught with your pants down, there's a good chance your empire will fall. Compared to Civilization 6, the cities work quite differently. By the way, I will be making a lot of comparisons to Civilization 6 because it is the most recent 4X game I have been playing. And I can also see that Amplitude Studios, the developers of Humankind, did take quite a lot of inspiration from Civilization. But the main difference comes from the fact that when a city is built, it immediately gains control over quite a large area of land. What I hope will appear in the full game is a way to further the city's influence zone, as sometimes really strange things like building a city right next to a strategic resource such as horses will take place, and the city will not include them in their influence zone, forcing you to build another city nearby if you want that resource. Maybe we don't even need the ability to expand the zone of influence, but just a way to decide in which direction the city's focus will go, or at the very least the ability to see where the influence zone will be before you build the city. Another big difference lies in how the cities themselves are created. You don't need any specialized units to build one. And if you hear this, you might think, well, that makes making cities completely free, right? And to a degree, yes. There are no resources needed to build a city, but what is needed is time. You first need to build an outpost that can then later be upgraded into a city. But this takes a fairly long time, and if you pick a bad spot and don't spend other resources to speed the process up. And the last big difference comes in how Humankind handles land. Don't worry, there are still land types that provide different benefits just as you'd expect. Forests provide industry points, rivers provide more food, etc, and everything is still in the shapes of hexagons. But there is another layer added on top of this. Land has different levels of elevation. Building your city inside a valley might cause you problems down the line when it's under siege. I mentioned that Amplitude Studios also took inspiration from Civilization cities, so let's mention those inspirations. Just as in Civilizations, you get districts that specialize in producing different things, and upgrades to the city center that make the city much more efficient. But even here, there are a few differences. You aren't limited to having just a single district of each type, and there is a much larger number of city improvements that I encountered than in the latest Civilizations game. There are also other ways to better a civilization apart from just building more cities and improving them. You also need science and governments. Scientific research in Humankind is done in a very standard way. Every few turns, how many depending on your science output, you get to discover a new technology that might provide you with a new building, a new unit, etc. You know the drift here. What I found lacking was the fact that there was no scientific tree available, so I couldn't plan out what I want to focus towards to. Let's say a military approach, as I didn't know which technologies would grant me better units. What, on the other hand, I liked very much was the approach Humankind takes to governments. You don't just choose a particular government type and add some civics that grant you benefits as you do in Civilization. Instead, over time, you push your civilizations towards a certain governmental type with your decisions. These can have a huge immediate impact or even no impact at a given moment. But over time, they will make your civilization quite different than it would have been if you made different choices. Just to give you an example, one of the earliest events says that in one of your cities, the leaders have begun to castrate men because they think it will make them more loyal. And you can either ignore it, forbid it, or even celebrate it. Each of these has a small immediate effect, but mostly, the larger effect of pushing your civilization towards a certain mentality is the most important thing. Yes, and there are also laws that are called civics. You can really see the inspiration from Civilization, and you can enact these, but I didn't like these much at all. Not that they weren't important or even cool choices that introduced powerful effects for your empire and also skewed your civilization's mentality. Those parts I liked. What I didn't like was the fact that I had no idea at all on how exactly I gained access to them. The game claimed the better grip I had over my empire the more I gained, but why did I get that certain particular one? Seriously, I had no clue. This, I hope, will be resolved in the third version. Now, it's time to talk about the part many 4X players enjoy the most. The last of the 4X's. Exterminate. And what I mean by that is the combat. And the combat is really the thing Humankind wants you to compare to many other 4X games, because it is quite a lot more involved compared to the game most 4X fans play the most, Civilization. The first very large difference lies in the fact that instead of units themselves, you get armies. Armies can be comprised of up to 5 units, and it's a good idea to try to strive for a balanced army with both melee, cavalry, and ranged units, because it's a bit of a rock, paper, scissors kind of game. Because cavalry units generally counter ranged units counter melee, and melee units counter cavalry units. I don't know if this changes in the modern era, because the Lucy OpenDev only played up to the early modern era, and the most modern unit I got my hands on before the game ended was a ranged unit that used muskets. But I think generally they will try to retain this kind of paper, rock, scissors thing. The fact that the combat is performed by whole armies comprised of several units is not the biggest difference compared to more traditional 4X games though. The biggest difference lies in the fact that the battles are sort of a mini turn-based strategy games in themselves. The battles start with a simple decision. Do you want to fight, or do you want to retreat if attacked? If you choose to stand your ground, then the second phase, deployment, takes place. In here, you deploy your army, who would have guessed? This phase can literally make or break a fight, as positioning plays a gigantic role in the combat in Humankind. I sort of already touched on this subject, but this is the best spot to explain how terrain plays a role. The elevation is essentially the key, just as it is in Star Wars. If you have high ground, then your chances increase by a lot. Being forced to travel towards a higher elevation reduces the damage of units, and attacking from the high ground can increase it, or even allow for an attack in some cases where the attack would not be permitted otherwise. For example, ranged units can't shoot to higher ground if they aren't directly next to the hexagon they're attacking. Other factors can affect the effectiveness of your units as well, such as crossing a river, which also reduces attack damage, certain units benefiting from having units of the same type around them, etc, etc. So, the positioning really is the key to victory unless you heavily outpower your opponent's army. Yet, that's still not the end to combat. After you position your army, there's still the battle itself to be fought. Attackers get a huge advantage because they get to attack first. You get to decide which unit in your army attacks which unit in the opponent's army. And focusing your attack is the second key needed towards victory, as units can get weakened by combat. To be more specific, the units themselves are comprised of several smaller units. You know what, this is a bad way to explain this. Let me try a different way. So, let's say your swordsman unit has 10 swordsmen in it. If you attack first, you get a full strength. But if you attack second and the units are first being targeted by opponent's archers that have killed half of them, well, then the swordsmen only have half the power. That's why attacking first and targeting down units plays such a huge role in combat. And after all the attacker's units attack, then it's time for the defender to finally make his move. The battle itself is separated into 5 turns for each player, and if it's not resolved by then, it will actually extend into the next main game turn. This takes place mostly in eras that are further in the Humankind gameplay, as by then you start to have enough armies to attack in different places. And yes, I almost forgot, multiple armies can be part of a battle, but the size of the battle is predetermined by the game itself and not you. So sometimes you will only get to use the army as reserves that sub in when units that started in the battle have already died. And for those of you who are not fans of combat, there's also an auto resolve for the battle. Overall, the combat for me personally was really enjoyable and allowed for much more greater strategic depth compared to most other 4X games. So if you are a strategy game fan who likes to battle out, Humankind should really be on your radar. Though, not every problem in a 4X game should be solved through combat. There's also trade and diplomacy, and this is another strength of Humankind. Well, to a degree. The diplomatic options in Humankind are much more involved compared to the civilization games, where essentially you have very few options that can be achieved with your rivals. Here, the number of attitudes a civilization can have towards you is really high. From the standard things like neutral, friendly, or hateful, it also includes things like protective, where they feel the need to protect you against outside threats. Jealous, where they literally realize you're so far ahead compared to them that they despise you because of that, and there are so many other options. When it comes to regular diplomacy, you can set up things that are normal, like trade between your civilization, open borders, or a non-aggression pact, or even a full-blown alliance. And what I really liked was the fact that when you enter an alliance with a civilization, a list of completely new options open up, giving you the option to control how deep the alliance is. Whether you just want to share the military, or perhaps even have a huge influence on each other's cultures. This was really cool. What I found somewhat strange was the trade though. I got a system where you want to buy something very easily, but I didn't really understand how other civilizations gain trade with you. It just started happening on its own without me getting the options to set the prices or ask for specific resources in return. It's just interpreted as individuals in the civilizations trading between each other and the game's just informing you about it. But I do wish there was a bigger way to influence this. Wow, this thing is already pretty long, and I don't want just to explain the whole game to you guys, so it's time to talk about the more superficial parts of Humankind. Starting with the graphics. I mean, just look at this. For a 4X game, Humankind is, well, gorgeous. The amount of detail put into the game is just astonishing. From the terrain, the cities, to the units, and especially their animations. The combat animations had enough effort put into them that in most games, the devs would just end there. There is no doubt that this is a AAA game and has the visual fidelity to back it up. And then there's the artwork that comes with the events and whenever you reach a new era. These animations and images in themselves are worth screenshotting and putting as your wallpaper. Then there's the music, which I would rank as very good. Not the best thing I have heard in a game, but very good. It's not something I would add to my playlist for regular listening, as I do with some other games' music, but definitely okay to listen to while you're playing. But what is the best is the voice acting. While purely in English, it is very well done and very well acted. And lastly, there's the performance, where I was pleasantly surprised. You have to remember, this is the beta version of the game, so having a few bugs is expected. And I did encounter a few bugs, but the majority of them were visual glitches where an army got stuck in one of its animations. The biggest bug I encountered that really needs to be fixed happened only when I had a very large number of the city center improvements. Then, when I wanted to build more, they were invisible in the build menu. But I found a quick fix that just relied on clicking the button that collapses and shows the buildings, and then they were back. But it did happen repeatedly and definitely needs to be fixed. But apart from the few visual glitches and this one thing, the game ran really well and never crashed on me. That's a good sign for the release. So, in conclusion, Humankind looks that it could be one hell of an interesting game for anyone who likes strategy games, and almost a certain pickup for people who love 4X games. The Lucy OpenDev beta test showed that the game seems to be well fleshed out, decently optimized, and getting ready to be published in late April of 2021. Its core strengths lie in a very complex approach to the terrain and especially to its combat. While we didn't get to see the two most modern eras in this beta test, everything until that point seemed to play very well no matter whether you prefer a diplomatic or a more combative approach to building a world-dominating civilization. The game looks gorgeous and is very fun to play. I personally can't wait to see the full version and play it. Though, I need to stress this out, don't pre-order. No game is worth a pre-order. You never know whether the developers will be capable of getting rid of all the bugs and whether the launch of the full game will be a clean one. Just look at Cyberpunk. On the other hand, if the game piqued your interest, then definitely keep your watch for the release and reviews of the full release version to see whether it's worth your time and worth your money. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you liked the video, and if you do, please consider giving it a like, perhaps even subscribe to the channel, and be sure to share it with your friends. And also comment if you have anything you would like to add. See you guys later with more gaming content.